Well, hello again, everyone. Thanks for coming here, being here this morning at the OKC WordPress Users Group. We're glad to have you. It is my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Mandolin Skipworth still? Okay, oh man, sorry, I panicked there for a second. Anyway, Mandolin has worked with one of my strategic partners for the past 3 years. And so she's really focuses on content. I've actually known Mandolin sort of known her even longer than that. You're a graduate from Oklahoma Christian University here in the OKC area. So she is going to talk to us today about SEO content. Without any further ado, Mandolin.
Yay. Okay. I think you can see me, but hi guys. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk to you all about SEO content. I feel like it's something that's been floating around. I mean, it's been around forever, but I feel like more recently than ever, SEO has been a big buzzword topic for us to talk about. So I think it's something that pretty much any business owner or person in business, somebody that has a website, needs to be aware of and know how to take care of themselves or how to talk about it with somebody that can help you with your SEO content. But maybe I can click through, maybe not. While Sarah's helping with the clicker, I am Mandolin Skipworth, like Tim said. My last name is Skipworth. There we go. And I'm the creative marketing strategist at Oaks Creative House. I've been there for almost 3 years. And like he said, a lot of what I work on is content-based, but also strategy-based. So a lot of, in terms of SEO, keyword research, SEO research, and also helping with marketing plans for our clients. And a lot of that manifests in the physical work that I do into content. So that's newsletters and blogs, social media, website pages, pretty much anything that has content. I've written it in terms of the marketing that we do for our small businesses. So I'll preface this by saying I have dabbled in the more tech side of things in terms of SEO, but today really it's going to be content focused because that's what I specialize in. So how to write strategic SEO content for your website or your blog or even your social media in order to help you be recognized on Google more regularly. Some of that more specialized tech things, you might go to someone else for that. But if you have any questions at the end, I'm happy to help you. Okay, so I figured start by setting kind of a even playing field here by going over the loose definitions of what SEO is and how I think of it in terms of the work that I produce and how I think is helpful for the content that you're writing, whatever that may be. So simply put, SEO is the strategic process of improving the chances that your client sees you on Google. And I say Google because it is the most used traditional search engine. Other places like Bing and Yahoo and all of that still exist and you can be optimized there, but Google is primarily what people are using on their phones or tablets or computers. Something else I think that is important to note too is that other places like YouTube or Pinterest or Instagram and Facebook are also being used as search engines these days. So there is a little bit of SEO optimization that you can do there. So it's not just Google focused by any means, and it's not just even traditional search engine focused. People use a whole myriad of platforms now to, do their searches. And that really also depends on where your audience is, which we'll talk about in a minute. Okay, so what qualifies as search engine optimization? So search engine optimization, like I said, is not just content. There are a whole bunch of different things that you can do to SEO optimize whatever you're aiming to SEO optimize, traditionally like a website. And that includes things like your site speed and the time spent on your website. So even if you dive into content and you're feel like you're really knocking it out and you're rocking it, if your site doesn't load, if it has too large of images, if there's too many animations that are making it super slow, then your website's not going to be prioritized and it's not going to be something people spend a lot of time on. So you want to make sure that you have all these puzzle pieces in place. And then type of content. You want to make sure that your content connects with people, and this goes for social media as well. Like if you are putting out content that people don't want to engage with, that they don't relate with, that they don't feel like they connect with it anyway, then they're not going to stick around for long. They're not going to go back to your profile page. They're not going to click on anything, and so you're not going to get the return that you want from that. And then, of course, keywords used, which we'll talk about, and then making sure that you have alt text on images and that your website or graphics that you create or whatever it is are accessible for people, because you might be, eliminating some of your audience, and Google actually doesn't like when your website's not accessible. That's becoming more and more important. So we want to make sure that those are all in place as well. So there's a whole bunch of different things that you can do in terms of SEO optimizing your website or your blogs or whatever it may be. And then, where is search engine optimization important? Kind of talked about this, but pretty much anywhere that you're found online, because even in a Google search, your social media profiles can come up. It's not just your website. You want to make sure that you have a Google profile in place, that little section typically on the right side if you're looking on a desktop. You want to make sure you have the right information there and that you show up there when people search for businesses like yours. Essentially, you want to make sure it's consistent across anywhere you can be found online. So that said, all of those pieces are important. Today, we're going to focus on just content and how you as a business owner or person in business can really understand how to write content that is SEO optimized for your specific industry and business. And I've created a pretty simple 5-step process here. I will say different things work for different people, but I think that this process is pretty high level enough that you could loosely follow this, even if you tweak some things within once you get started and see if anything particularly stands out as needing to be switched for you. But I think first and foremost, you need to identify your audience. Not all keywords mean the same thing for every person. So you want to make sure that when you're doing your research and when you're writing your content, that you have your ideal audience in mind, that you know who you're talking to. Once you have that in place, you conduct keyword research, which I'll dive into each of these pieces a little bit deeper here in a second, but you want to, with your audience in mind, conduct keyword research that helps inform the content you create. Then you're going to choose your content piece. Now, this is, again, a little bit broad, but if you are doing steps 1 and 2 before you do anything else, then once you sit down to write that social post or write that blog post or write that new website page or update your website, then you already have those like concrete foundational pieces in place that once you go to write, you know to reference back to them and you have concrete research there that you know works. And once you choose your content piece, once you know what you're working on, you can look at that and say, okay, what keywords do I need to focus on for this piece of content? What makes sense for this? How much do I need to focus on them? And then step 5, once you have all those 4 pieces, you'll go ahead and start writing. Okay, step 1, identifying your audience. So like I said, not every phrase and keyword means the same thing to every single person, and you don't want to be marketing to every single person because that's a waste of your resources. You're not necessarily going to get the same return that you would if you had a focused vision for who this person is and who I want to work with, who is my ideal audience, who is our business's ideal audience. So in terms of keyword research, I think there's a lot of things you can do in terms of identifying your audience. But specifically for SEO and keyword research, it's important to know who are you talking to? Like, who is that broad, audience? Where do they live? Where are they located? That's really important for SEO as well, because even if they're online, or maybe you serve nationally or internationally, or you're located to one specific state or location, you want to be specific about that so that the right people find you. And what do they value? I find this very important for the work that I do in SEO, is understanding kind of what the person values in their life. For example, if My ideal audience was a working mom. She has 3 kids. She sends her kids to school and then goes to work all day, comes home, picks up the kids, and then is responsible for taking care of them in the afternoon. Maybe they have sports and things that they need to do. She really is probably going to value efficiency and having people that are willing to be a little bit flexible with her on timing. She might not have the traditional like 9 to 5 time periods to answer questions. So it's important to kind of like know who that person is, how are they searching, what are their habits, and what do they value. And my little tip that I put there is I like to list out a little overview of who the audience is, and what they value before I dive into keyword research, just to have that little like section up there at the top of the document I'm working in where I'm writing out all my keywords, to keep in mind and remind myself like who this person is. And then how much do they know about your industry? We will talk about this in the keyword research as well, but I think a lot of times we assume as professionals in our industry that they know the lingo and they know all the jargon and that they're going to search what we would search, but that's not necessarily true. So think about who your audience is, how new are they to your industry, you know, like, are they going to know the pieces of or phrases and words that we do? Okay, then step 2 is to conduct keyword research. I'll start with the things to know. Like I said, what is your audience actually looking for? This is important because you want to make sure not to, you know, like put walls up by accidentally using lingo that they're not going to understand. But it's also important because what you might identify as is not necessarily what they would know to look for. And I say that to say we've had clients in the past who, for example, an HVAC company did not like the phrase HVAC. They didn't like that term. And so they asked that we not use it. But when we go and look at their keywords on Google Search Console, or even what people habitually are searching for, when they need somebody to fix their heating and air, they're going to search for HVAC. You know, so regardless of what, you know, biases you have about the terms used in your industry, you need to like strike a balance of, okay, they're probably going to be searching for HVAC, so I need to use that on my website, I need to use that in my blogs. And there could be even education on there that's like, hey, this is why we don't necessarily prefer this phrase, but you have to meet them where they're at, and somebody that doesn't know you isn't gonna know not to search for that. Same thing for somebody else that I ran into as another example is holistic versus biologic. A lot of people are looking for holistic health, not necessarily biologic health, even though they preferred this term. So it's also a balance of like educating your audience, but still using the terms that they know to use and are looking for, so that, you know, you're found by, you know, the right people. And then once you kind of get to know them, you can spend more time educating them on the different terms and phrases. In terms of actually diving into the keyword research itself, there are a ton of tools that you can use. The top 2 are ones that I use pretty frequently: Google Keyword Planner and the Ryan Robinson free keyword research tool. Google Keyword Planner is in Google Ads. I believe you need a Google Ads account to use Google Keyword Planner. That might have changed recently. But Google Keyword Planner is great because it's, you know, it's Google, so it's the highest used search engine. It's pulling right from its own data, and you can enter 1 or up to 10 keywords at a time that you think people might use, and it'll also give you a list of recommendations of keywords that people are actually searching, as well as the number of times it's searched in a month. It'll typically give you a range and how hard it is to rank with that particular keyword. So those are labeled as low, medium, and high. So a low competitive ranking keyword would be technically easier to rank with, and high means it's more competitive. That doesn't mean that if you use a low ranking keyword, you're automatically going to be in top 10 search results, but you have a better chance if you're regularly working that into your content. Ryan Robinson is also a free tool. There's nothing, you don't need an account or anything. And the downside to it is that you can only enter 1 keyword at a time, and then it'll give you some recommendations. for additional keywords, but it's not necessarily as niche because you're only entering one word at a time, but it's helpful as like a partner to Google Keyword Planner, because if there's something that Google's not giving you the data that you hope to see, then you can jump down to this other tool and enter some individual words. What's really cool about that program too, the Ryan Robinson free keyword research tool, that's a mouthful. It'll also give you blog post recommendations for the keywords that you're using, social media post topics. So it's a pretty cool tool to develop some ideas. Some other popular ones are SEMrush, and I've never actually said that out loud. But I think Ahrefs, Ahrefs.
Yeah.
But those are both additional like SEO tools that you can use. They have education on both of those, I believe. They are typically paid tools. There's probably free options for you there, but to get the most out of them, there's paid accounts and additional education. So even beyond these four, there's a ton of different tools that you can use. And again, it's just about finding what works best for you and what you need. But I have had pretty good success with the top two at least. So there's probably something out there for you. And if you already have a website and it's connected to Google Analytics and Google Search Console, another good place to start is to look at what people are actually finding you for. And maybe there's a little bit of a misunderstanding. They're searching one thing and you don't necessarily want to be known for that thing, but for whatever reason, they're finding you from it. You'll want to kind of shift the narrative based off of that, or you can get ideas from Google Search Console, the like search terms that they're using. You can get ideas from that too, and maybe try to prioritize some of the ones that you find there. Okay, so once you have your audience, once you have your keywords, it's time to actually dive into the content. So it is important to know which piece of content that you're actually working on, whether it's traditionally one of these three in terms of keyword optimization or SEO optimization, but blog posts, websites, or social media. I'll say for social media first, it doesn't work the same way as blog posts and websites. For example, Google really likes you to have pretty robust content. I'll show you in a second, but typically for the content that we write for our clients, it's at least 800 words, if not more. Of course, you should not be posting 800 words social media posts. I don't even know if every account will let you do that. So there's some things that don't necessarily apply to social media, but there's things that you can do. So like if you have you've done your keyword research and there's some questions or topics in there that people are asking, those can be topics for your social media posts. YouTube is a huge search engine nowadays. You can answer questions on videos or do video tutorials and then mention those keywords and phrases in the description and in the title. There's different ways that you can optimize your social media posts. In terms of blogs and website pages, those work pretty similarly. You can have pretty robust content there. You can use your keywords however many times without it sounding chaotic or over the top. So, you know, having an understanding of what piece you're actually working on and what rules apply to what you're working on is important. Okay. So then assigning your keywords. This is primarily related to actually working on a blog or a website page. I actually think the tip there at the bottom is it's really helpful to assign your keywords when you're doing the research. So let's say you are like, man, my website's just not performing how I want it to. I want to rework a lot of the copy. Even if I don't do it all this month or even in the next couple of months, I'm going to do this keyword report. I'm going to list out the different pages on my website, and I'm going to list the different keywords I'm going to focus on for those different pages, just to have it laid out while it's fresh. And then once you come in to work on whatever page that is later, you have those keywords to reference. And like I say there at the top, I think it's beneficial to choose 2 or 3 keywords for your longer content, like blogs and web pages, just because you want to hit your keywords a certain amount of times. And if you only have one keyword, and you need to say it 15 times in 800 words, that eventually kind of becomes a little bit repetitive and people can catch on to that. So you want to have a diversity in the words that you're using. And you want to make sure that they're actually usable in your content. I said this on the previous page or previous couple of pages as well, but a lot of keywords that are going to come up in your research might be like business OKC. Like that's not necessarily something I can naturally work into my content, or even a lot of things like doctor near me. You're not going to be working doctor near me into the content enough times for it to really make sense to use that as a keyword. So you might look for something that's like holistic doctor in Oklahoma City. Now that's something that's an actual like, correct grammar. It's a phrase that you can use in your content. So when you're doing your keyword research and when you're selecting keywords to use on your content or in your content, you want to make sure that it's spelled correctly and that it's like something that could actually be turned into a sentence or worked into a phrase pretty easily. And then similarly, you want to vary your keywords across your content. So why I think it's important to assign it up there up front at the beginning is because you want to probably not be using just the same 3 keywords on each page of your website. If you have multiple services and even like multiple little, you could have like a niche, but if you have like sub niches within that, you want to make sure that you're covering your bases there, that you're answering questions people might have about your industry. So you want to have a diverse set of keywords on each page of your website. So typically, if we're working on blogs or websites, we'll put the primary keyword up there for each of them, which is the first of your 3. And the primary keyword should be different on every page. And then we'll have a little bit more flexibility with the other 1 or 2 that are included as well. So maybe there could be some overlap there, but you don't want it to be too much of the same thing. Plus, that would get very redundant on every single page of your website if you have the same few keywords. And then also just think about any trends or seasons that are relevant for your business. If you have a cleaning business and it's springtime and you want to talk about spring cleaning and how that's important, how to have your home cleaned after spring break, like once the kids are back in school, that's a good time to talk about that subject. So it's also beneficial to go and think about what specific keywords people are looking at a certain time of year and what their popularity is then, and jump on those trends. Traditionally, you want your content to be pretty evergreen, but even if it's related to spring break or spring cleaning, that could come back and be a valuable post year after year. And then diving into actually writing your SEO content. I will say that I don't think that there is necessarily a perfect formula that fits for every single person, every single business, and Google and different SEO tools themselves change their parameters quite often because technology just changes, and that's just the fun of marketing. You get to kind of adapt as things change, but I think these pieces here are a good foundation for you, a good list to follow, so that you have something to kind of keep in mind and know that you're actually working strategically towards being SEO optimized in terms of your content. So like I said earlier, if you're writing a blog or a website page, then having a good amount of content on that page is going to have you be seen as valuable, trustworthy, that you're not just flippantly throwing copy, like little pieces of copy up there and leaving it and hoping it works. It allows you to also work your keywords in more frequently and naturally without it being oversaturated because you have more words to work with. And it really challenges you to think about, okay, what questions am I not answering because I'm an expert in my field. So of course I can explain this in 100 words, but maybe I haven't answered this question quite specifically, or maybe I need to, give them testimonials to look at. Like, what is my audience actually going to be looking for that I can include in that content to make it more robust and actually allow them to not have to go anywhere else to look for the answers. They can spend the time looking at your page or your blog and know that they're getting what they need. Then like I said, 2 to 3 keywords per web page or blog post is typically what I use. You have a little bit of flexibility there. But I think that amount allows you to use the keyword enough times for it to actually, for Google to actually recognize you as being an expert in that specific term, without having to use it too many times, that it sounds crazy. And then one of those, typically I listed out 1, 2, 3, that first one's always the primary keyword. Excuse me. The primary keyword needs to be included in the headline or title of your website page or blog, traditionally. In the little section that like when you search something on Google and a little blurb pops up underneath your website, there's a little like sentence or two, your keyword should be in that section as well. And there's ways to do that on some different website platforms, depending on what you work in. It's pretty easy to plug that in. And then that primary keyword needs to be worked into your content throughout, along with the other two. The other two have a little bit more flexibility, as long as they're worked into the content enough times. So that said, I typically recommend that people work their keywords into their content about 5 times each. Now that's just a concrete number to give people. That's not necessarily the magic formula that's going to get you recognized immediately, but it's just kind of a number to aim for. Because traditionally you want to hit about 1% of your content is made up of your keywords. So if you have your primary keyword naturally fits in there maybe 7 or 8 times, then that last keyword doesn't need to be in there five times necessarily. But just kind of hit a good variety, because you also don't want them to just be in there once, because it's not going to have the same, it's not going to make a difference, but you want to just be smart about it. Whatever keywords fit in there more times naturally, that's fine. You just want to aim for about 1% of your total keywords, or all of your keywords combined is 1% of however long your content is. And if you're using SEO tools on your website, if you have a WordPress website, there's a tool called Rank Math that will do some of this for you and track some of this. It's kind of like a checkbox, helps you with. But if you have other websites where maybe there's not as many robust SEO tools, you can still like write it in a Google Doc, take, do the Command F, Control F of your keyword, look for how many times it's used just to kind of check yourself. And then also don't use too long paragraphs. People skim things all the time. The chances of somebody actually reading your content from top to bottom, every single word, every single time is very, very low. So you want to make sure that they are getting the high points, and a lot of what is going to help with your SEO content is, of course, the keywords and the research you've done, but also how engaging you are and how you actually format your content. And is it written in a voice that makes sense for them? And you don't want it to just be a bunch of huge chunks of text. So you want to make sure that there's headlines included. You want to make sure, you include bullet points where it's relevant. And include images with captions. You want to make sure that it's interesting to look at and actually entices them to keep scrolling and reading. And especially if you think about, this isn't the case for everybody. Some people do have their, most of their audience sees their website or blog on a desktop, but a lot of people are on their phones. And if it's just massive text on their phone, that page gets pretty long. So you want to make sure that it's something that they actually want to keep reading and doesn't scare them away. And then another thing that's important in terms of SEO, and a lot of tools are recognizing this as more and more important, is including links on and within your content. So that would be, so if you're writing a website page, that would be links to other pages on your website, which would inherently make it easier to navigate and for people to find what they are looking for, as long as it's formatted well. But then also linking to things outside of your own website and your own content. So if there's a scientific source that you're referencing, it's great to link to that. If there's a book that you're referencing or an author that you recommend, it's good to link to them. If you have even your own social media profiles, if you have them, going ahead and linking to that so it's easy for people to find. Those are all great links to include in your content. And then overall, like I said, it's really just important to, pay attention to these things, but don't get so caught up in it that it feels like a chore. I mean, all of this is really important in terms of SEO content, but at the end of the day, you understand who your audience is, or you should. I mean, if you've gotten to this point, it's really important to understand who your audience is. So you want to make sure that you're writing in a way that catches their attention. And based on your research, you probably found topics that maybe they're actually looking for, and you want to make sure that you address those topics on different pieces of content. And you can address the same question multiple times. And that's multiple times in your blog, maybe multiple places on your website, multiple times on social media. And I know I've even found this myself as a content writer. Sometimes it feels so repetitive. I'm like, I've used this freaking keyword 10 times. How is somebody else not like feeling like this feels unnatural? But in reality, I've seen this. I've worked on this piece for so long. I've worked with this particular client or even Oaks Creative House itself for so long that it feels so repetitive to me. But in reality, like I said, most people are not reading every single thing that you do. That doesn't mean you don't put work into it, but it kind of alleviates the pressure of maybe this feels repetitive, or maybe I'm, stewing over this over and over and I'm in my head about it. Really, you just want to make sure that you're hitting some of these things, you're reaching your audience in a voice and addressing the content that they actually are looking for. And it likely more often than not does not sound repetitive to them. And even if it was a little bit, people actually need to see things like 5 to 7 times to know, or to like actually make a decision to purchase or, engage with a particular business. So it's okay to feel a little bit repetitive. And you could always have other people check your work a little bit too, if you're worried about it. And then my final reminder for you as we wrap up, I'm a little bit early, but as we wrap up this piece, just reminder that SEO takes time. You are not going to necessarily see a huge return on investment in one blog post in a month. I mean, there's always the chance that it goes viral or something happens, but more often than not, it takes time to build. And if you're building truly evergreen content, then not everybody that you're ever going to connect with is going to find you immediately. So this is something that you're thinking about as helping you now, but also build your client and your audience further down the road. So traditionally, I would say give it at least 6 months, if not a year, to actually look back and reflect on the work that you've done. And again, this is just one piece. This content is just one piece. But if you have some of these moving pieces in place and they're like actively working for you behind the scenes, you've set these up, you're blogging monthly or whatever it is, after a while, somewhere between 6 and 12 months, you can look at it and say, okay, here's the months we performed well. Here's the months we were down for whatever reason. What does this mean? Is it typically a trajectory of it's still growing? Have things kind of stopped and slowed? What things do I need to change? But if you're changing things every month because it's not performing, you're getting anxious and excited to look at how things are doing and how your hard work is performing. If you're changing it every single month, then that's also not going to give you the SEO optimization that you hoped for, because you are confusing your audience inherently, and you want to make sure to kind of stick to the same tools and tactics, and then after a while come back and revisit it and be like, is this working or not? So all that said, I feel like that was a lot of information to throw at you all at once, but I hope that was helpful to kind of understand how to technically write SEO content in a way that makes sense. And then also still understand that you are talking to your audience and you want to sound like a human and not like a robot. So it's important to kind of strike the balance there. And some of these parameters, especially some things on this slide, are helpful in, making sure you're doing that. So all that said, any questions? Yes, Tim.
Can you go back 2 slides to the one that had all the kind of your guidelines for the system? Yeah, that's it. Perfect. So I'm curious because I know this is a really solid system, but there's like a million systems that you can use with kind of slightly different guidelines and slightly different approaches.
Yeah.
So kind of like you kind of mentioned this as you've kind well, I don't think you use this word, but kind of codified it so that there's some specific guidelines in here.
Yeah.
So when you actually get into it, or when you're working with someone that's doing this, like which of these guidelines do you think, oh, that's kind of the most flexible one, or that's the one where I'd give someone the most leeway on that one?
I think in terms of, I'll say this about keywords. So a lot of times in the content that we write for our clients, we are using rank math as the keyword tool to kind of help us check some of these boxes. Rank math will look for that specific phrase. So if you're using like
You said like businesses, okay.
yeah, like like Oklahoma, yeah, holistic doctor in Oklahoma City.
Yeah.
So it's going to look for specifically, you know, holistic doctor in Oklahoma City. Whereas I don't think Google is necessarily looking for that exact phrase every single time. So I think there's depending on what tools you want to use, regardless, there's a little bit of flexibility in that, like, okay, like maybe we say something like, we're, you know, like switch up the phrase a little bit, you know, so that it's still hitting on like, we're a holistic doctor, we are located in Oklahoma City, those words don't necessarily need to be in the same order every single time. So it really, I mean, like, we try to stick with the exact phrase because of the tools that we use, but there's a little bit of flexibility there.
Okay.
Yes.
Keep looking at AI search engines, and is there a way to look and see what kind of traffic you're getting from these search engines?
That's a good question. I don't know about how to actually see what traffic you're getting from those search engines. Maybe somebody else in the room might know. But in terms of what we're doing for our clients, ChatGPT actually pulls from Bing. So Bing is what they're actually looking at. So we find it also important. I say Google for most people, but if you are wanting to, because that's a popular use search engine, but Bing's also important to SEO optimize for. So you want to make sure that you're showing up in the right places there too, and kind of doing some of your research over there. Because if you're only looking at Google, ChatGPT is not looking at Google. So it would be a matter of like looking at what AI tools. And it's so new, there's probably some information out there about like who's using what AI tools, but looking at where your audience is, where those tools are actually pulling from, like what search engines or resources, and then seeing how you can be present in most spaces.
How do you check content either that you've written or have you assigned to somebody else for these guidelines? Do you just go down in a checklist or do you put it into something?
So actually, even though we use rank math, and rank math will check for most of these things, which again, that's a plugin for WordPress. I'll typically receive content from our freelancers or people that we're working with in a Google Doc or a Word doc of some kind. And I just kind of like, before I actually read the content, I'll go through and look at, okay, how long is this? Is it super short? They are automatically probably need to add a little bit more content. That being said, what pieces are missing that I think I could recommend to them to kind of beef up the content a little bit. And then I'll just look, you know, search for the individual keywords to make sure that they're actually worked in there. I will, when I hand off content, which is something that maybe you might do, I'll go ahead and give them the guidelines, remind them of that, and say, here are the 3 keywords that we're working on for this piece. Here's the primary keyword that needs to be in the title, and then let them run with it. And then in terms of things like using long paragraphs, that's pretty easy to see, like if you're just skimming the content, but if you plug it into rank math, if that happens to be something you use, I mean, it'll point that out to you. But ultimately, I'll bring it back into the Google Doc anyway, so I'll just run through the list and check for that.
And you assign those keywords when you assign the content?
So Michael on Zoom put a link to a AI search grader that lets you see how AI sees your site or company. It's through HubSpot. It looks pretty helpful. He also had a question, are there any AI blog post writers or any advice you have for using AI to help write posts without creating content that is the same as other content found online?
Yes, so. I think there are a lot of tools that can help get you close, but at the end of the day. You're going to want to lay hands and eyes on that. Something that we've used, it's a paid tool, but it's pretty cool, is the StoryBrand AI. It's a content tool created by, I don't know if you're familiar with, but it's the guy Donald Miller who wrote Marketing Made Simple, a ton of business and marketing books, and he follows a specific framework that's helpful for business owners. This sounds a lot like an ad, but it's not. But he uses a tool or a system that's helpful for business owners or framework in writing your content, positioning you as a guide, making you seem relatable to your specific audience. And within StoryBrand AI, he has, like a ton of things. Writing content for you is one of them. We've used ChatGPT as well to help with some of this stuff, but at the end of the day, like if you're asking any piece of AI tool to write you an entire blog, it's not perfect in actually including the keywords is what we've found, or at least not in the way that you would naturally see them come up in the content. So you'll still want to double check to make sure that some of these parameters are hit. But I think like the most specific one I would recommend would be StoryBrand AI.
Google's page, I love what they say about this, which is they have a page about AI content and they say a bunch of stuff about it, which is kind of, they don't care as long as it's high quality, but their specific line I love is if you see AI as an essential way to help you produce content that is helpful and original, it might be useful to consider. If you see AI as an inexpensive, easy way to game search engine rankings, then no.
Yeah.
So
That's funny.
Yeah, I think it's like, especially if you're not a writer, it can be overwhelming, or even if you're just super busy, it's hard to like sit down and write. I mean, I know it's what I do every day. It's hard to just knock something out and it's gonna work perfectly. So I think like AI tools are a great place to help you kind of generate some of those ideas. And create an outline for you, even at the bare minimum, to help you kind of know what to write about. And I think is particularly helpful if you're somebody that can't seem to get past like the 300, 500 word threshold. It'll be really helpful in kind of getting you some good starter content to kind of then, go in and rework. At the very least, you're going to want to read through it and make sure everything looks right. And is what you want it to be. Anything else?
that's your time. No, I'm just kidding. That's
Pretty early. Okay. Well, that's it. Thank you guys for watching and listening to me. I hope this was helpful for you all.
Thank you everyone for being here. Be sure to follow us on meetup.com and Facebook. We'll be posting the rest next month, and then the rest of the year's meetup soon. We hope to see you next time. Thanks.
Nice job.
Yeah.